All right. Welcome. Good morning. My name is Richard Youngman. I am the CEO of Cleantech Group, and my colleagues and I have the pleasure, thank you to the organizers for essentially hosting this room during the day. I'm sure you're aware that most of the day is a marathon, and there are like 24 company presentations of various sorts coming up from 9:20 to 5 something. I'm sure people will be in and out, but our role this morning really was just to warm up by providing some context. Um, so that's what myself and my colleague Sarah will do in a moment. We're going to cover two or three things. We're going to give you an idea of how we view at least the state of UK clean tech innovation in a sort of more international context. Is this a big market, small market? What are the kind of key trends going on? Driving towards introducing you to our initiative called Cleantech for UK, which is really taking the view that the supply of innovation to decarbonize our global economies by 2050 is probably not going to be the limiter. The limiter is there going to be enough demand quick enough to fulfill the kind of solutions that the innovators wish to supply. And we believe that policy is a critical enabler, and Sarah will explain what we're doing with that initiative. For now, some simple messages and some numbers, but really this is a global context. So Cleantech Group, I should explain, we are a leading authority on what is going on with cleantech innovation globally. Since 2002, we've made it our business to follow the companies, the investors, the players, the trends, and help people through our services engage with what is now one of the most active innovation themes in the world. So I think the thing to take away from here is if you're close to the world of venture capital, you'll probably think and realize that venture capital has come off at what I would call a tear for the last few years. But this theme, perhaps different from others, is actually still upwardly mobile, if you like. You can see the burst of activity that's really happened from Paris onwards, but it really, funnily enough, coincidentally coincided with the pandemic, where you saw an extraordinary amount of capital coming into the space, and therefore the numbers and the types of companies, the amounts of investments and the rounds globally has been rising. So we're talking about a 2.5 times over the last 4 years. Two of the big drivers of that, so if you think about the full set of clean tech or the full set of what we have to decarbonize, we're talking about everything from the food world to the transport world. And it's really actually those two that were the most dominant themes in the early years of this chart, but they're also the reason there is a slowdown going on quarter by now. You might argue that these are two of the themes that have been most heavily invested in. The good news is there's so many other solutions to invest in that other areas are picking up. In a European context, so I said about 2 to 2.5 times. In Europe, it's actually the uplift 18 to 22 has actually been stronger, more like 3 to 3.5 times. So I was referring to this sort of full portfolio. Europe's probably a bit different than the three. We really look at the sort of world in three blocks, sort of the Americas, Europe, and the Asia Pacific. Europe probably stands as the most what I'd call diversified, meaning that all the 5 areas that we are following have remained in a relatively tight band, which is good news. What it really means is capital is flowing into solutions across the full problem set. And you wouldn't be surprised to know that probably over the last year or two, energy and power, which wasn't one of the biggest worldwide trends in terms of investment, amount of rounds, capital, has become so, and particularly in Europe, and this is clearly a strong reaction to Russia invading Ukraine and all the ramifications of energy security. So one thing to take away is the UK is just in a global game. This is very different than other innovation themes in some way. It is happening everywhere because the problem set is everywhere, the industries are everywhere that we're trying to decarbonize, and how you go about them is not going to be a cookie cutter solution that fits worldwide. So very different than scaling software businesses. We expect that the sort of global champions are going to come from everywhere, all over the map. And if I point you to the top right, what you are seeing here is, whilst venture capital is still strongest in the US and will be for some time, in the world of clean tech, the actual deal count, there are companies being born, funded everywhere, and what we've seen over the last 5 years is a very strong performance, if you like, from everywhere else. So I'll finish on the UK and hand off to Sarah, but really clearly, as I said, we live in a global world. The UK is exhibiting many of the same trends in terms of this uplift 1.3 to 3.6 over the last 4 years. I think it's incredibly healthy, or pretty healthy in terms of the earlier stage. There's a lot of vibrancy. There are a lot of companies being born in a way that was not happening at this sort of volume 5 to 7 years ago. Sarah will explain our views a little bit about what happens in between, because at a very simple level, we think the UK is a powerhouse when it comes to giving birth to science and innovation type companies. We have some question marks about whether it's actually exploiting the full potential of that through the whole commercial chain, and hence why you get quite a lot of acquisition activity. She will top on that. I'm going to end here, introduce you to Sarah, who's going to pick up. I'll just say that this program, something we started this year, it's very important, we believe, that this community of innovators, venture investors and so forth is much better represented at the policy tables, because we believe that's one of the great enablers of going faster. Do you want this? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Sarah.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I am, as Richard mentioned, I am working on Cleantech for UK, which is a new initiative that represents investors and gives them a policy voice to help them communicate with government. And it's delivered through Cleantech Group, but it's sponsored by Breakthrough Energy. I represent 6 investors at the moment in our coalition, but I'm sure at some point we'll also grow that out. Cleantech for Europe is not the first one that we've set up. We also have Cleantech for Europe, Cleantech for Nordics, Cleantech for Baltics, all with a similar objective to increase the policy conversation in this space. So as part of the work that I've been doing, we've been doing some research into the UK market, and I'm going to talk to you today about some of our key findings. The first one is some good news, and I think the amount of people here at this conference today sort of echoes this good news, that, you know, the UK is a really strong global performer, it's a well-developed market, and we do some really great stuff in this space. You know, we've seen sort of over the last year or so that we've seen larger than average deal sizes and a diversification in the types of deals that are being done and the types of sectors. So Richard has already mentioned, sorry.
I'll just go for it.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yes, so this graph just shows quickly, particularly in the UK, we've sort of seen very strong energy and power, that's the green line, but then sort of increases in materials and chemicals in the last year or so. Richard sort of alluded to this already, but you know, we've seen that the early stage investment landscape is very well developed, but some of the larger funds and sort of from Series B onwards are still sort of less well developed. You can see here the types of investors. So these are investors that have done 3 or more deals between 2020 and 2022. You can see sort of at seed and Series A, there are many serial investors, but at the later stages, investors tend to do less than 3, quite often only 1, certainly no serial investors, sort of very few serial investors at the later stage. We've seen that innovation activity is heavily concentrated at the moment around the golden triangle of London, Oxford, and Cambridge. Perhaps that's not surprising, as it's one of the earliest clusters to have emerged. But this map here shows that the darkest blue spot down here and the blue spots around, and then less well developed sort of further on in other parts of the country, but those are sort of younger clusters that are still emerging, and we need to encourage those to emerge further. So, as I've mentioned, I think that we need some new innovative mechanisms to fund from Series B onwards, and we really need to develop more in this space, both publicly and privately. This is just a graph showing that fact. You can see here that growth equities has done quite well, but at Series B in particular, there's definitely a bit of a gap in funding here. This is the sort of public sphere, roughly, of common programs that we have at the moment. UKRI and ARIA are the research funding bodies, and they have pretty big budgets. And then we have a whole load of programs in the middle, but we're still waiting for people like the British Business Bank, which is this future fund, and UK Infrastructure Bank. We're still waiting to hopefully see some more deals coming through from them. And then just finally, I think we've got a good story that we've had so far, but some things have changed this year, the last couple of years, in particular with the Inflation Reduction Act in the US and the EU's Green Deal. It's really going to change the landscape, I think, and we really need to see something more from the UK to hopefully keep us competitive with those other countries. Now, because whilst this is a race that we all need to win to get to net zero, we very much want to take advantage economically, which means that we really need to have something in response to what those other countries are doing. So I'll just sort of very briefly finish with a summary that the UK has a good story to tell, but the future's uncertain. We've got good investment, but we need more at Series B. And, it's great to see you all here today where we can talk more about this. Thank you.
She's perfectly on time. So our instructions are to always leave 5 minutes. So the first presentation will be at 9:20. If you want to talk to us, we'll be here now. We'll also be here all day because we're chairing this room, albeit that will be done by 3 or 4 or 5 colleagues during the day. Anyway, have fun. Look forward to seeing some of you during the day.